87% of employees would prefer to stay home at least half the time, even when it's safe to return back to the workplace, as per new data by Glint and LinkedIn. We have seen a 2.4x increase in remote jobs in the last 1 year on LinkedIn, taking the earlier 6% contribution of remote jobs to all jobs on the platform right up to 16%. And in less than 6 months, we have seen flexible work arrangements jump up from the seventh most important to the fourth most important factor for talent that is considering a new job. These data points are no surprise as we are all in the midst of a disruption. As great as the sudden shift to remote work when the pandemic started, to the move to hybrid work, which is a blended model where some employees return to the workplace and others continue to work from home. Well, we are all learning as we go, but we know two things for sure. One, flexible work is here to stay. And two, the talent landscape has fundamentally shifted. Remote work has created new job opportunities for some, offered more family time, and provided options for whether or when to commute. But there are also challenges ahead. Teams have become more siloed, and digital exhaustion is a real and unsustainable threat. So, how do we attract and retain talent amidst these changing demands of our workforce? How do we design our policies, keeping not just our employees and their needs, but also that of our customers? How do we create deeper cultural changes that are needed for a hybrid workforce model to be sustainable? I'm Ruchi Anand, Director of LinkedIn Talent Solutions, and I welcome you all for our panel discussion this afternoon with prominent leaders representing diverse organizations from technology services to global logistics and a large telecommunications major. Sanjay, Wendy, and Samir, welcome. And please join all of you. Please join me in welcoming them. And they are here today to share with us few forward-looking approaches to embed the right experience and engagement throughout an employee life cycle and plant the seed for long-term value creation. With that, let me introduce you to our speakers. Samir Bendre, Chief People Officer, Persistent Systems, a leading technology services company. As the CPO, Samir is responsible for Persistent's global HR, people engagement, talent acquisition, and development initiatives. Samir brings with him over 20 years of technology, finance, and operations experience. He was responsible for establishing Persistent's Nagpur and Hyderabad centers and was the head of operations for the Nagpur center before taking over as Chief People Officer. Welcome, Samir. I now have the privilege of introducing you all to Wendy Shah. She's the CHRO of DB Schenker, a global logistics major. As the Chief Human Resources Officer, Wendy has been associated with the organization for more than 9 years and has contributed in designing and finalizing HR policies aligned with all business strategies, developing workforce plans and programs. Welcome, Wendy, all the way from Singapore. And I'm really happy to see Sanjay Jog, CHRO of Reliance Jio. As a recognized business leader with more than 2 decades worth of experience across the service industry, especially in managing large conglomerate business operations, Sanjay has a demonstrated track record of providing strategic direction, driving revenue, and human capital growth. He is a people's person by heart and believes in the keep it simple policy. And that's what we are all looking forward to today, to simplify the complex and keeping it simple. So welcome, all of you. And before we dive into the topic and get into serious discussion, let me just ask you one question, really, to get to know what have you really learned personally, maybe any one skill that you have picked up in the last 1.5 years. Yeah, if there's something fun that you'd like to share with us, or maybe if you'd like to talk about a travel destination that you'd like to go to. So maybe Sanjay, should we start with you? We can't hear you
Sanjay,
yet.
you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, now we can hear.
So much for technology and whatever. Okay. Yeah. So two new skills actually. One, I used to learn the piano, but I've started learning it very seriously because that was great for me in the last couple of years. So that's, in a manner speaking, an old and a new skill. And there is certain tolerance to the way I cook. So I think I may have done something right. So probably those are the two I could think of.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Sanjay. Samir, would you want to go next and share?
Sure, Ruchi. Yeah. Okay, let me also sort of add two skills and then maybe talk about the place where you would like to sort of go out to. I think the first skill, which like I think most of us did, is something related to cooking. So I was some person who really never went into the kitchen. From there to actually bake some very interesting cakes, and this thing is something which I learned. Uh, Another thing, which is something which was used to be my hobby earlier, it had completely dropped off the grid, especially with the work schedules and all, was picked up my photography again. There's a time when I used to publish an annual calendar, uh, which is to circulate. I've started that again. So that was another thing which really came back to me. And when you talk about photography, where can you miss out not going to different destinations? I think really eyeing to go down to a nice beach places. But one place which I really want to go back to again is Andaman Nicobar, which has been one of my favorite places. Visited it quite a few times. So that's something which I'm looking forward to, and next holiday whenever I can.
Wonderful. So travel with a purpose. Also enhance your skill as well as enjoy. That's great. Wendy, over to
Yeah.
you.
Okay, so for myself, the gyms in Singapore have been closed for quite a while. So, as someone who thought that I would never ever enjoy running because you have to do it alone, and it's like, yeah. So I started running. I picked up running, and I think I'm on my third or fourth virtual marathon now. So, yeah, suddenly I realized I can run.
Wow.
Wow, wow. I mean, just from picking up running to actually
Wow.
getting to marathon level, this is wonderful. That's great to hear, Wendy.
Yep.
Wonderful. Good. Now that we've had the opportunity to ask these questions to our speakers, I think it's time to ask our audience some questions. So there's an audience poll. Can we please have the audience poll live up? And what I'd request our audience to do is go to menti.com and type in the code 16428702, and we'll have the question. So can we have the question, please? Okay. So the question that we have for our audience as we dive into the discussion is that what's the most challenging aspect of managing talent in a hybrid work model? Is it attracting and retaining top talent? Is it empowering talent with the right skills and closing the skills gap? Or is it building the right experience throughout the talent life cycle? And wow, we are seeing the results live, and we almost seem to have a very much distributed poll across the options. While yes, I do see the third option of building the right experience throughout the talent life cycle is really going up to 50%, 52%, and increasing. Great. Now that we have most of the directional results from the audience, as you can see, it's actually going up right up to 60%, where one thing that's on top of your mind and you think is most challenging is building the right experience throughout the talent life cycle. And I agree with you. All these aspects are important, and let's kind of dive in and hear from our panelists their experience and how can they help us create a much better experience. So let me get into some of those questions. And one common question I have for all our panelists, we'll go one by one, is what is the one initiative that you have taken in the last 1.5 years that you would like to amplify and you'd like to continue as we make this shift, coming back into a hybrid or remote policy? And also, what is that one thing that you feel is working for your industry in particular? So, Wendy, should we, it'd be nice to hear from you. Maybe if you would want to first share with us what are the few things that you've been seeing in your industry.
So I think in the last 1.5 years, what really became very apparent is that human resource needed to be very agile to adapt to the ever-changing situation. So for those of you who have been following the news on Singapore, we went through a circuit breaker. We went through a kind of a midway kind of relaxation of rules, and then we went back to tightening, relaxation, tightening, relaxation. In fact, the latest round of relaxation happened just yesterday, the day after the National Day. So what initiative did we do from a HR? I would say that employee engagement, right? Managing employee experience is definitely still top on the list. In the past, we used to do company-wide events like the annual D&D, staff com, things like that, bringing everyone together at the same place to create experiences, team bonding, because we are actually dispersed in multiple facilities across the countries. So it was not possible with all the movement restrictions. So as much as HR tried, right, to I would say continue with the efforts. For example, we were planning for a food truck day, whereby we will send food trucks, right, offering Instagrammable, food items like lava cookies, rainbow sandwiches to the ground to keep the people motivated. We realized that a lot of times the plans will have to change, and we had to have many cancellations. Then the question came back to, is it really just HR's job to keep people motivated in a company, or can we decentralize the effort? Can we empower the leaders in the company to take up efforts and then bring their teams together until the pandemic is over? So most recently, we saw a lot of initiatives coming up from, let's say, our sales department. They have a very well coordinated series of meetings that happens every Monday, 9:30, just half an hour, so that everyone remains focused on the virtual sharing. And to drive away Monday blues, they even had a breakfast delivered to the participants of the meeting. So over a course of four Mondays, yes, we had the best ever sharing session from the sales team as well as the operations team on what they have achieved over the couple of months. So I would say that is one initiative that we see gaining a lot of traction and success, and likely we will continue with this kind of decentralization of employee engagement.
I love that. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. They're very actionable points I heard from you, Wendy. And yes, it is everyone's responsibility, to your point. And it's not just HR being just the custodian of running this, but it's every leader. And how does HR empower everyone across the board? Great. Let's move to Samir. Samir, what would be your thoughts? What's that one actionable maybe that you'd like to share?
Okay, so this was a very interesting last 15 months or so, and a lot of different initiatives, I think, but one major change which we have seen is the way we are designing our processes and policies. I think the way we design them for flexibility rather than from efficiency, I think that's where the complete mindset shift is happening. So complete design thinking, saying that, hey, every time I want efficiency as my biggest thing which we want, that has shifted. So how can I be flexible? How can I understand different people aspects, different business aspects on whatever you want to address. That would be one major thing which we have been able to do. Other thing which we have been doing is when you look at the shift, I think you need to look at what your core business is and how are you doing to energize your core. So if you're looking at us like a technology industry, if my core is I'm going to give technology solutions in this time, how do I strengthen this more and more? These are the two things which we have been doing quite a lot. And not only we are seeing benefits, but that is something I would certainly encourage people to look at doing. Look at your core and energize it a lot. And look at flexibility because that's going to be the demand.
That's great. I really like your point on solving for flexibility rather than just efficiency. And I think it ties into Wendy's a point around ever changing scenarios. So thanks, Samir. So Sanjay, I know that you shared some examples when we spoke earlier. Love to hear from you. One or two to begin with.
So what I'll do is I'll let me set context and I'll elaborate. Otherwise I'll take too much of your time. So the context was in terms of our mindsets of you know uh, electricity brought us industrial revolution. That was the beginning. Yeah, and therefore factory centric, and that was the mindset, right? And that those mindsets still exist in some parts and so on and so forth. Yeah, internet got us the digital revolution, and therefore we got used to that world, etc. Both these things, we had time to react. We had time to react because we knew what it could be, and there was enough time to then adjust or readjust and so on and so forth. But when the pandemic hit, yeah, we were not, we were prepared and not prepared kind of thing. We knew it happened in China, started in China, it came to Southeast Asia, etc. But we didn't wake up as early. And therefore, this hybrid revolution is something uh, that was thrust upon us in a manner of speaking. And therefore, time to react, and everybody was shooting from the hip, kind of thing. Yeah. So that's one context. Yeah. So from factory centric to office centric to how do we now work together? How do we collaborate together, and so on and so forth was again something that was thrust upon us. And to me, the result was that we completely reviewed, or our assumptions were completely wrong in many places. Yeah, and therefore we had to revisit our assumptions about work and workplace, etc., etc. Yeah, and therefore this whole mindset about face to face is the only way to work, and that's why we created fantastic offices with fantastic eating and whatever else that we did. Yeah, uh, to suddenly to say that maybe that's not the only way to work, and therefore moving from office centric, and the office centricity had become so such a major thing that it almost become a differentiator in terms of hiring talent, for example. Yeah, to now be, coming to what is called as human centric. You suddenly have to look at the individual and say, what is it that I need to do differently? What is it that I need to work towards so that it happens to be business as usual? So to me, that's the major mind shift change. So if at all there is something that I would like to say is about the preoccupation for the last whatever couple of years has been about mind shift change from the office centricity to human centricity. Yeah, so that's where I leave it and elaborate it as examples a little later, maybe. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sanjay. Yes, I agree. It is definitely a mind shift change. And in some sense, while we did not have time to prepare when the pandemic came and move to, virtual, like work from home, now this is the time that, and that's why I'm seeing a lot more audience questions that are really coming in, as a lot of, like 66%, as per a survey, also 66% global leaders are looking at redesigning their policies. So it's no surprise. All right, let's get into more specific questions then. Sameer, let me come back to you and ask you this question really around. You mentioned also a lot about decentralization, as well as how you've defined processes. I want to know that there's so much action happening in your industry, where there's a lot of growth, and which clearly means there's a lot more hiring that's happening. And to Sanjay's point, where you're shifting from an office centric approach to a human centric approach, and looking at attracting talent being a differentiator. How do you become an attractive employer, and how do you really look for candidates, differentiate yourself as an organization when the same candidate is being booed by many organizations? You're on mute, Sameer.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sorry. Okay.
Not done.
Yeah. So my turn to miss that. Uh, so when you look at our industry and especially the way we are seeing, sort of while some people are calling it a war for talent, others people are saying that there's actually a talent famine and there's just not enough talent available. We need to look at this, and the way we have been looking at it is two things. I don't think we have reached a state where we are going to be at the end of are we going to end up being a complete gig economy, which we have been talking about for the last 8, 10 years, are going to land up there? Or this is only a mid step where people are going to be coming back to what was the plan A, which was working from office, which we don't know. It's going to be, it's such a state of flux. So you need to sort of ensure that while one side you attract the right talent, also find out ways how you can engage and retain them in turn. I think today the biggest challenge is the biggest advantage which we have today when we look at the current situation is that the boundaries on where you want to attract talent are gone. Don't have to worry about where the talent is sitting, which place she's working from, where he's available to work from, because anywhere you can be in the beaches in Goa or in the hills in Himachal, and I can still get you to work with me here because that's how it is. And that is one thing which, thanks to companies like Sanjay, yours, have helped us that the connectivity has been good. So we have, as a company, as a country, proved resilient enough to be able to deal with these challenges. I think that's where it is. So now the value proposition which we give to our people is going to be your differentiator. Yes. Are you really finding the right type of work? How much are you investing in the right fit for the work which that person or the talent that brings to the table? That has been the important focus rather than looking at people on just work experience. So skill and the fitment. So you now have to spend more time, invest more, little bit more in every hiring which you do, every people which you get on board, saying that what is your life journey and how am I part of your life journey as an organization. Get those alignments done, and only then you will get the right talent. Otherwise you're just going to be a me too in our industry, where everybody is trying to say, I'll pay you X dollars and somebody will pay you, I'll pay you a little bit more than that, and it's a race which nobody can win. So I will have to look at creating much more stronger employee value propositions, what the value is. And I spoke about it, and I also saw a question about somebody asking about this when we talk about the energizing the core. It is to understanding who we are as a company. If my company, and I spoke about a company, if you think that my whole, uh, as a company, we speak about a line which is very, very proud of. We say, employee first and customer always. So you think that if I'm going to look at the employee as an enterprise, how that enterprise as an individual is growing, and how does customer always remain as a customer centricity together. That's the thing which you look at. And when you hire, you need to keep these two things in mind every time. It's easy to lose focus of this, especially given a lot of the pressures. But that is something we need to reiterate again and again to the people, saying that look at these 2 points and you'll be able to hire talent from anywhere. Having said that, yes, that is a very, very tough, challenging market for hiring, and you keep on renovating, innovating on the way your talent acquisition practices are. So that's something which we have been trying to do. So far, it's been going pretty well. Hopefully, it will continue in those fashion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sameer. And I'll take the liberty of adding something that I've heard about how you and your team have been revamping and gearing up for that growth. Even while you spoke about values, as well as you spoke about obviously being customer centric and not moving away from that, providing your clear value propositions, I think you've also made sure that diversity, and how do you kind of make sure you're hiring, you're re-looking at the way the JDs are posted, being mindful of everything so that it truly kind of reflects and kind of opens up and attracts the right kind of audience, expands the talent pool. So thanks for sharing. I'll probably come back to you, Samir, with more specific questions. Since
Sure.
you mentioned about Geo's role in connectivity and helping us, stay connected, let me go to Sanjay and ask Sanjay this question specifically around how have you made this shift in moving to virtual, especially one example of 22,000 of your call center employees were, made to move obviously virtual and still ensure that customers like all of us had, good uptime. There was customer satisfaction that is always maintained. So do you want to talk to us about that as well as how you moved and what are you thinking about now?
I think it's first, it's important to understand the framework. What's the framework that you apply, before taking the decisions that we took? See, I think the major outcome of hybrid working, if I would call that, was expectation of flexibility. So there was flexibility required on everything, whether you as a manager or whether you as an employee in terms of expectations, etc., etc. And therefore, designing around that flexibility is, when you look at various roles, etc., etc., becomes important. And therefore, the framework that we looked at is what are the roles which are synchronous in nature and what are the roles which are asynchronous in nature. Yeah. What are the roles that, probably require or have been only working with face-to-face as a mechanism? What are the roles that can work together, but they can be apart? They could be anywhere for that matter. Yeah. What are some of the roles that can be done alone together? So, for example, yeah, if you're a developer, if you're a coder, for example, yeah, doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, you are working alone but together because one's input goes to the output of the other, and so on and so forth, kind of thing. Yeah. And there are people who can continue to work alone. For example, people who are in planning, people who are in designing of our network, and so on and so forth. So when you apply that framework, you get a fair idea in terms of saying that what are the roles that can shift or comfortably shift to working from home, in a manner of speaking. Yeah. So let's use that as an example. Yes, we have 22,000 call center agents, and they were located in a particular office or across 6 offices across India, kind of thing, because of the language and so on and so forth. It was more out of an incident that happened where somebody from the outside came and said that you should close down your offices, etc., etc. And we were suddenly faced with that situation. So we said, why don't you go home and answer calls of customers from from your mobile and kind of thing. Yeah. It took us about a couple of weeks to put a platform together where people can actually have the right customer data being available to them to respond to a customer. The most important thing was security, because telecom information is security sensitive, both in terms of customer data as well as otherwise data in terms of location, etc. And therefore, putting that layer of security was extremely important. That took us a couple of weeks. And then people started working from home, all 22,000 of them. I'm saying it very easily, not that it was as simple as that, but yeah, sure. What we quickly realized was that it was not only working from home, people started working from hometown. And that provided a completely different way of looking at people. So if you wanted language, a particular language people, you had to go to that particular state to get that language. So Tamil Nadu, for example. But imagine there are people who speak that language in north part of India. Yeah. And they can be made available. Suddenly the flexibility that was made available in terms of a workforce, was of a very different kind. The other big learning was that there are people who were willing to work with you with 2 hours a day and 4 hours a day kind of thing because they had time on their hand. Yeah. Suddenly that became available. And because as a mindset, the whole thing, the office centricity that I was talking about, when you're office centric, you want people to actually come to work and, deliver. You're not open enough to say that, you can come for 2 hours and 4 hours and so on and so forth. Yeah, you can always throw the book of law and say that, it's not allowed and stuff. But this suddenly provided a very different kind of an opportunity and different kind of a workforce. Of course, the challenge was how to manage them, but that's later. So I think this was an example of how do you the flexibility was actually forced. Let me not say we did something great in terms of understanding. It was something that was forced. But I think the opportunity, grabbing that opportunity, was really what defines it in a manner of speaking. Yeah. I'll give one more example and then kind of hand over to Wendy. Yeah. Customers had to be accessed because there was a huge service demand, saying that I need high-speed connectivity very quickly. Yeah. And the demand was through the roof. Executing the demand was quite a challenge because people were used to, either coming to the store and saying that I need a connection and so forth. Yeah. But they were now asking for a very different kind of mechanism to access. And therefore, we enabled our sales team, 26,000 of them, 42,000 of them. And we said, why don't you start accessing customers over your phone, kind of thing? Yeah. And we have the ability to look at India as micro markets. So we have the data available to look at India as micro markets. Yeah. So about 80,000 micro markets is how we define India. And therefore, making that data available in terms of saying that somebody requires enhanced service, somebody's, the other issue and the big issue, I'm sorry, I'm digressing, but was people migrated. Yeah, suddenly people, you saw a huge number of people, going off the network, and it was in thousands. It's not in hundreds and so forth. Yeah. Suddenly, you had another challenge saying that how do I access these people and that enable them to stay back on the network because they just left, and the only way they did recharges was to go to a shop and and kind of do their recharges. Yeah. How do I therefore now enable that they can do recharges remotely? The mechanism is available, but they're not used to it because Mass India doesn't do it that way, etc. So that was another big thing that happened in terms of customers being accessed and customers being provided service, whether it was recharge or otherwise. Yeah, they thought that if they went to Bihar from Delhi, their phone is not going to work. Yeah, whereas everything is roaming and so on and so forth. So so both in terms of employee education and customer education, if I were to use the word, yeah, those were the two important things in the call center piece and the sales piece that happened. Yeah. So I leave it here. I don't know whether I answered your question because for me it is like I'll use the Hindi word. गाय का निबंध बोला है तो मैं तो गाय का निबंध ही बोलूँगा.
Okay, no, this is helpful, and I will for Wendy to explain what this means. Sanjay, in fact, what you spoke about, you've also ended up answering one of the questions on the from the audience, and I'm going to take that in parallel. One of the questions also by Piyush was what roles can go fully remote, what need to be kept in person, and I think the framework that you spoke about initially around really identifying roles that are synchronous and asynchronous in nature. I think that's the framework, Piyush. I feel, what we need to kind of look at what kind of roles. So actually going back to the drawing board to see where and how can we reimagine certain roles there. As well as I think one takeaway for me was how the talent pool has expanded, and that's something even Samir kind of mentioned as well, how it has expanded, and you have been able to also get people who have been able to give a few hours or part time and also add to your sales team. I think there was another question around on moonlighting as well. So somewhere you've kind of covered that, but we can probably come back to that. But since you spoke about customers and how you've been trying to make sure people have access, I want to ask this question to Wendy. And Wendy shared a very interesting anecdote with me when I was speaking to her earlier around being a logistics company. One of the key things from a customer perspective is that customers would normally come to their facilities to take a virtual tour, to take a tour of their warehouses and all of that. So how did you enable that while most of your employees are virtual? And that's one part of my question, Wendy. So it'll be nice to share with the audience. The second part is the same question that I've asked everyone. How have you particularly looked at the really servicing the increase in the demand for hiring? Because I know you've also seen a surge. How have you been able to manage that? So over to you, Wendy.
Okay, so let me answer the first question. Yeah, how do we create a virtual experience for the customers that is as enriching and as valuable to them as compared to before pre-COVID, where they were able to walk our facilities in person, right, and speak to our employees. So it's something very interesting. It came from the angle of L&D. So all this while, Shankar has been providing a lot of e-learning opportunities. However, we see quite, I wouldn't say like extremely enthusiastic uptake of e-learning. People still prefer the face-to-face training in the classroom. However, because this work from home has forced us to stay within our bedrooms. For some it's the living room. What became critically clear was that we needed to train our employees in a very different skill set. So drawing inspiration from Facebook Live auctions, from like a lot of TikTok hosts trying to sell their wares, from cookies, homemade cookies, to I don't know, all sorts of different homemade items. We realized that one thing that made these successful sellers stand out was people who managed to master the art of live streaming. So with this in mind, we approached the broadcasting station, yeah, and we started to look for instructors. We were at one point looking at newscasters, we were looking at actresses, actors to actually train our staff. How do you be engaging behind a screen? Right? Sure, there's things that technology can help you with, like VR and things like that. But how do we bring that personal touch? So in fact, as we speak today, we are in the second day of training in the office, yeah, by a live host who is from the broadcasting station. So the staff are enjoying themselves. We are very excited to see how the first filming will take place, which is next week. How comfortable our people are going to be in front of the cameras to bring to our customers a truly live experience. So that's one of the L&D, I would say, learning and development initiatives that we have. And to the second question, we experienced a large volume business surge in the last 1.5 years. So with all the borders shutting down, we have a lot of employees returning to their hometown. However, because we are part of the supply chain, right, critical supply chain, so we still need to fill our warehouses with hands and legs. And this is the time where we really struggle. So like what Sanjay has done, I think he would have spoken about the white collars. We did similarly for blue collars as well. We had some form of a job redesign. We simplify some of the work so that temporary workers can come in and be able to pick up and deliver immediately. We also tapped on non-traditional, I would say, workforce source, such as maybe part-timers, housewives, students, who typically we will not hire, right? And also we worked with the government as well as the unions, to look at bringing in people who were displaced from the airlines, from the hospitality, from retail, and from F&B, through very quick on the job kind of training. We rated them for the roles. But most importantly, I think we also recognized that it was the best time for us to amplify what Shankar stands for, which is we advance business and lives by shaping the way our world connects. So we took it further. For example, this year when we did our annual increment exercise. Instead of just a letter, we got our CEO to do a video clip that was embedded in the letter. So what he did in the video clip was to address each and every specific department, telling them how they contributed in this whole pandemic, because sure, everyone is very tired. We had many charters, multiple charters, more than we have ever done in a single year. So, but we shared with the employees, so the guys in Africa, right? You made it possible for critical medical supplies to be made to this country, that country, and things like that. And for sales, you enable, critical deliveries by redesigning the way, like from a passenger flight to a cargo flight, so people could really connect to the company's mission. And when we help them see the purpose of their work, that's when employees become the best ambassador for your company. And that's when we get more and more referrals to join us. I hope that answers your question.
Very well, Wendy. This is so many takeaways. Again, I'm seeing a theme emerge from what all three of you have said around expanding talent pools, even hiring from non-traditional, like the non-traditional hiring that we're talking about. And this is really fostering a lot of diversity as well, bringing diversity of experience and backgrounds into the way we hire, as well as, really solve for bridging the gap. So this is a great opportunity in the face of adversity as well, right? So as well as I really like the very specific example of the video clips by your CEO with the increment letters. I think that's a really nice way of personalizing and driving that impact. So thank you for sharing. That's really good to know. In fact, let me start picking some questions from the audience as well, and then I'll go back to my questions as well. Since you spoke about this culture of learning, maybe Samir, would you want to actually talk about how do you ensure that there is this continuous, how are you building that culture of continuous learning within Persistent?
Well, I think, quite frankly, for us, that was one of the easiest part of the whole challenges which we had. I think because we have always ensured that we are working on the cutting edge, the type of which we do, that for us to stay relevant, every individual has to stay relevant. And in the current technology world where everything is going to be new, whether the software languages you are working on, the programming skills you talk about, or the way the software delivery is done, right, from the older models to the current agile and scrum models which we talk about, everything has been changing. So for you to be relevant, you need to be learning, you need to be adopting the same. So that's something which we have been sort of embedded in our thought process from much earlier. So I think this was much more easier thing for us to do. But quite frankly, overall on this, you need to also look at saying that how do you really incentivize some of these things for people to really learn more. And it's, when you say incentivize, it's not just because of saying that how I give you more time or just give you more tools. But I've been very a strong believer of what we say. Again, I'm going to use the Hindi word where he's saying that some of these things, when you do learning and this thing, it has to come from, we say, tan, man, and dhan. So it has to be that you need to be wanting to do this. You need to be investing your own, something of your own into it, and not saying that just because I as an organization am I doing it. So you need to be doing it yourself. So that's the part of it. Mentally, you be wanting to do it. And when I'm saying done, it may not be, it's not money in the intro. Are you investing your own personal time? Time is money at the end of the day. So it's interesting to learn that. If you say that people start valuing what you do in the learning culture, when you ask people to put all these three factors together into the learning culture, and that's where it has been. And of course, like I said earlier, some incentivizing people for doing more and more learning, allowing people to experiment with different areas and not asking them to say that I want to straitjacket you in the learning only in the domain or only in the project which you are working on, helping that person to really broaden his horizons. So one thing which we did is, in fact, we, over the first quarter itself, when the pandemic hit us last fiscal, we actually went to each one of them saying that, why don't you create your own individual learning plan? which is development from different from your own development plan, which is there. It's a completely, we call it an ILP. Write your own. What are the things I'm going to learn over the next quarter? Create that. It may not be directly into your curriculum. It could be something very different. And thankfully, nearly about 75% of the people actually created a very good plan and implemented it for themselves, because then they saw a clear goal, saying that, hey, here is a goal which I have set for myself. It's not mandatory. It's not something which I'm going to assess your performance on, saying that, hey, did you perform on that? But it is something which you're giving yourself a mission on what you want to achieve. I think that's what creates a good learning culture in every organization. So that's what I would encourage people to look at, actually give an individual that mission to really learn. And when the craving comes from inside, then it's very easy for people to wanting to learn and to create new things.
Yeah, thanks, Samir. And I agree with you. This is pretty much like when they say that how do you motivate employees? You can't motivate anyone. You could just create an environment that people feel motivated. So similarly, from a learning perspective, how do you ensure there is onus as well as accountability for
Correct.
which comes from each individual with their individual learning plans. And I think another theme I'm hearing from all of you is around a lot around transferable skills, is also around
Yep.
learning skills which can be applied across as well, and not just staying only in your particular domain, but how can you kind of expand that skill set. So thanks on that, Sanjay. I just wanted to ask you, I'm picking one question again from the audience around what are the strategies that to make offline employees who are working from home feel more inclusive. And since you spoke about this mix of roles where you will have both some functions which will be working from home, whereas some will be in office, how do you like kind of create that? And it's linked to the culture kind of question as well. So
Yeah, I'll again talk about a framework first. Yeah. Uh, so that it can be read in that context more than anything else. Yeah. See, I think our whole preoccupation when we were working in office was how do I provide consistent experience to people. Yeah. We need to shift to flexible experience. So as a mindset, am I creating flexible experience? And that's a mind shift that I need to, because we've always looked at standardization rather than, because that's efficient. But to move to flexibility becomes a challenge. Yeah. We've always looked at I must give the same experience to people. Yeah, but I'm saying that now it is about providing the right equal opportunities to people. See what happens in most organizations, they are hierarchical in nature, which is true, and therefore everything that we do in terms of enablers are hierarchy related. Whereas in this world, yeah, it cannot be hierarchy related, because somebody will require an enabling which is of a very different kind, and it's not related to where you are placed in the hierarchy. Yeah, and therefore, when I say equal opportunity, it is about making sure that everybody has the right opportunity to perform. Yeah. Otherwise, you say because you're gray hair, so you get a Apple iMac or something like that. All right. Yeah, so that's not the point. The point is that am I giving the equal opportunity for people to perform? So that's the second context. The third was in terms of saying that management was about being visible. So as a manager, I was around, and therefore leadership was visible, and that's a relatively easier in a physical world. And now is suddenly in a hybrid world. How do I what shift do I need to make? And therefore, I need far more empathy. And when you use the word empathy, you're looking at an individual rather than saying this is the standard policy. This is the way we will come across, etc., etc. Yeah. And that's the challenge. Yeah. The third framework is to look at performance. Yeah, and to say that so we always looked at saying that these are the inputs I'm giving, and therefore people will perform. To saying that I don't care about anything else. Yeah, let people do what they need to do as long as they're producing the right outcome. Yeah. Otherwise, I also looked at how they are doing their job, and in this world, I need to shift that to saying that can I be more outcome focused? I'm saying more outcome focused. We were outcome focused, but more outcome focused. Yeah. So look, by saying this framework, I lost your question. So tell me that again.
No, I was actually talking about how do you make the workplace more inclusive, where you
Correct.
have mix of yeah.
Yeah. So if these frameworks are there in your mind, yeah, then you will start doing the right things in terms of the culture that you want to. Yeah.
Sure.
So, for example, we have something called as meeting etiquettes that we used to have. Large display in the meeting room and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Right.
So the first thing that we did is, how do you have meeting etiquettes when you're working remotely or something like this? We use MS Teams for our work. Yeah. So everybody needed to understand what meeting etiquettes were in this world. Okay. The second was in terms of how do you come across? Yeah. I have wild hair today because I didn't have time to go and cut my hair. But otherwise, how do you come across is also very important. So how do you look professional? Otherwise, I could be in my night clothes and attending a meeting. How does it matter? I'm at home. So what's the basic that you need to do? We have 200,000 people that work with us. So therefore, how do you make sure that everybody understands that in the same manner? Yeah. So, because people form impressions based on, yeah, uh, how you look or how you come across in a meeting and so on and so forth. In a physical world, I have a time to recover. In this world, I don't have time to recover. I mean, yeah, because I can't interrupt, put my hand up, and so on and so forth. In a manner of speaking. Yeah. So that's a cultural shift, if I were to use the word.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
How do you respect each other's time and space? Yeah. That was the third basic thing that we had to put together. Yeah. You're at home, so I can call you up at 11 o'clock. Now, what's the problem? You're anyway sitting at home. Yeah. So you're always free. Yeah. There is no respect for lunchtime and whatever that, because physically you could always see somebody not at his desk. So, so that's okay, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And therefore, how do you react to that situation? Because people could get upset saying that I called, you are not available. Kind of. So what are the basic etiquettes in terms of? Not that I'm saying that everything was successful. I'm just saying that these are some of the things that we did. Yeah. And therefore, this shift to saying that don't worry about how people are they continuously in front of their screen or so on and so forth. Just look at outcomes and focus on that. It's a difficult change, and somebody who's a micromanager, it becomes even more difficult.
True.
Because I can't micromanage you now. I can't keep on telling. Whereas in a workplace, one would do that easily. And therefore, the insecurity that it brings to a manager, saying that, as servants who understood, etc. Yeah. So those are some of the fundamental basics in terms of change or shift in culture that one had to do. Yeah. To me, ultimately, that is the only thing that is going to work. Yeah. I might provide the right equipment, I'll provide the right processes, everything I'll do because it's simple to do. It's not a big deal. It's ultimately a question of do you have the resources or not.
True. True.
But how do I keep reiterating this mindset? Yeah, and I'll only give one example and I'll close, kind of thing. Yeah, we learned it from the cab hailing companies. What the cab hailing companies do is when the driver, logs in, he has to go through a training program, quote unquote. Yeah, it can be a 30-second clip followed by questions. Yeah, the clips could be skill related, or the clips could be customer centricity related kind of thing, or there could be a new process that has come in terms of billing, etc. Yeah. Until I go through that and answer those questions, I cannot log in and onboard a customer kind of thing. Yeah. So we use that learning in our platform and said that this is mandatory for you to do. Because if I don't massize it over 200,000 people, culture change won't happen. And to me, therefore, from voluntary to saying, no, this is compulsory. You have to open that clip, look at it, answer those questions, and then you proceed. So at least I have some comfort that at least I have communicated it to people. Yeah. So initial stages was in terms of what the cab hailing companies did, and that's exactly what we copied and so forth. And that probably set a tone in a manner of speaking, saying that, well, this is serious because if I log in, this is the first thing I have to do before I can move forward, kind of thing. So that conveys seriousness. That also conveys that I have to change the way I work. And to me, these cultural elements have to be institutionalized in a manner, and therefore almost making it mandatory rather than voluntary. Again, I don't know whether I answered your question, but I said what I wanted to say.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Sanjay. No, I'll just sum up what you said, and from making it an inclusive workforce, I think what is important, what you actually spoke about, is consistency, and as well as respect. In terms of how do you respect boundaries. So even when we have a workforce that's distributed, how do you have flexibility as well as consistency in some ways, where there's more flexibility rather than just one size fits all. So looking at what works best. And the other thing is really around like when we spoke about even training, right? I think some things which are mandatory are required, so at least you kind of make sure with a large workforce there is coverage, there is knowledge that has gone across for things that are mandatory across. So I think these are novel ways of making sure that it's a gated way to be able to move forward. I need to kind of continue and learn and then move forward. I think these are great points here, Sanjay. I'll pick another question, and maybe Wendy or Sameer, anyone of you want to probably or both want to just add from Chia around what are some of the mistakes or maybe pitfalls that HR leaders can make while crafting a hybrid work strategy. What can be avoided? I think this is a great time and platform to learn from one another and say, what not to do. I think we've been talking a lot about what to do. Let's kind of shift to what not to do.
Yeah. Hey,
Sameer.
thanks, Ruchi. I'll take that. I think it was when I was looking at the questions, I thought that that's a question I think we should take, because this is something which we tend to miss out. We're always looking at what are the good things to do. See, when we are now moving to a complete hybrid work style, and I believe it is going to continue. It's not going to We are not going to completely go to a complete work from office, or it's going to be more work from anywhere. You need to look at two things: that let's not stretch anything to the extremes. And especially when you, as people today, when we say, oh, because I want to be employee centric, I want to look at saying that how my empathy is important, my increased time management is important. I think we need to also be cognizant of the business part of it, because ultimately we are all expected to be business HRs. When you say business HR, the business part of it, there are some real impacts on business because of this hybrid working, whether it is productivity of the employee, whether how the customer is being serviced. These are going to be real impact. So how do you ensure that you look at this balance and not sort of, since we as HR suddenly have not only a seat on the table, we are able to now drive the table in a lot of extent. We should not overplay this card in saying that because I'm now driving the table, I lose sight of the whole business part of it. That's a mistake which I have been seeing a few HRs here, and I've been telling them that you just look at what's happening in the business scenario, what's been changing. So let's not look at doing these things. The second thing which I would really like people to look at is saying that as we develop into this new mechanism where people are working remotely and there is going to be in hybrid working where some people are in office and some people are not in office. When you engage with people, when you communicate, it's very easy when you have a uh, not an heterogeneous but a homogeneous group, and everybody's front of you, it's easy to address people or talk to people. Or if everybody is remote, then the options and communications are different. So look at the way all your communication systems are designed, which ensures you take care of, address both people in front of you, so that they are having the discussions with you and you're not missing the cues. Also ensure that what are the people who are outside, who are remote in that respect, because there could be many different digitally remote people talking to you. So this could be some few things which we need to really avoid doing. Of course, there are many things as the hybrid work culture really comes and more into photo. But these are two things which I would certainly look at doing. Understanding that your business HR would be a very important part of the whole balance which we need to achieve for both the customers as well as for our people.
Absolutely. Thanks, Samir. I agree with you. Anything in extreme is something that is detrimental, right? So when you talk about empathy, as well as I think having a good balance of financial discipline and discipline which is right for the business as well. Wendy, anything that you'd like to add onto this as well?
Yeah, I think Samir brought up a very good point on, managing, if you're managing a homogeneous group today. So, I mean, I can share an anecdote from my side. So when we all had to work from home, and we had to move to virtual, a lot of us make assumptions like, okay, because the company gives you a laptop, because we have stable connection in Singapore, you will be able to conduct your meetings, attend meetings, very effectively, which is not the case, because what we forgot is that, in some of the houses, you have 3 members of the family. In some of the houses like mine, I have 3, but I have 2 dogs. So, and I can't control when they start barking. And in some of the families, you have many children who are also schooling from home. So what we need is a lot of patience and a lot of empathy. And this could be sometimes sidelined in the pursuit of P&L, put it very frankly. So at the beginning, I did have business leaders coming to me to say, like, Wendy, can you make it kind of a policy that everyone switches on the camera when we have virtual meetings? Because I can't tell whether the person is paying attention, because I can't, tell whether the person is dozing off or whether the person is even sitting in front of the laptop. At one point, I was very tempted, to be honest, because I struggled with my team as well. However, when you do some conversations on the sideline, you realize that, okay, because people had their difficulties. Some of them were sharing their, the same table with their children. Some of them just haven't gotten their workplace set up yet. However, eventually, what we do see is employees, switching on their cameras more proactively. And you can tell that they are already at ease with the arrangement. We should trust that they are professionals who will make all the necessary, I would say, changes or adjustments such that they can, again, participate in meetings, showing their faces and body language, letting the conversation flow more freely. So I think one thing that we can avoid, right, is due to pressure of time, pressure of productivity, pressure of efficiency, or whatever. So it's to always remember to have that extra dose of empathy, of understanding the giving a little bit more bandwidth, or giving a little bit more freedom, flexibility to our employees to adapt. Yeah, like I think Sanjay, what he said at the very beginning, which got me a little bit laughing, was that we were all shooting off our hips. It's like we don't have the perfect answers as leaders, because this is the first time that we are facing this as well. So never be embarrassed to say that, okay, I made a wrong decision, guys. Let's relook at it again. Always be open for this kind of open conversations. That's what I would see as a main takeaway. Yeah.
I love that, Wendy. I think that there's just so much value in being authentic as leaders, as organizations, to say that we are also learning and we are on that path. We're trying to figure this out as we go ahead, go forward, right? So even um, taking the best decision in with that context, in that frame of mind at that moment in time, probably will be different when the scenario also changes. So I think being open with that, I really like that point, as well as also how we do need to kind of make sure um, we're not missing out in terms of where patience and empathy is required, while, to Samir's point, having that good balance of a business discipline as well. So this is great and very good takeaway. So another question, maybe we'll just take one or two more questions before we close, but one question again from the audience, and maybe Wendy, I'll just stay with you and then we'll pass it on to maybe Sanjay. More around, I think this question is around sales specifically, where I'll just read out the question. It is, except for one FMCG company which instructed their teams not to go on the field, it is a difficult scenario to get the sales team on field. The plan has been beaten in spite of vaccination drives. How do we attract talent? By openly sharing that field work is a mandate. And the reason I thought, Wendy, I'll probably start with you. I know maybe it's sales or other roles that you have within your organization which require people to be on site, right? So how do you balance that and still kind of attract the right kind of talent? And yeah, and then maybe we'll also hear Sanjay's perspective from a sales point of view. Yes, Wendy.
Yeah, so definitely, I think for the logistics industry, we definitely need to have people, hands and legs in the warehouses, and in some of our more process admin-based roles, right? How do we continue to attract? I think one thing, first thing first, we need to share with the candidates or the talents that they will be in a safe environment, that Schenker takes all the safe management measures very, very seriously. So we will openly share with them what kind of initiatives in place. We are very transparent even with our customers. So I think one thing that we did that was initiated by the CEO office right at the beginning of the pandemic was that we had monthly webinars with the customers as well as the different leaders from the Schenker offices worldwide, joining into the call, understanding what is the situation in Singapore, how has it affected our operations. We also had expert speakers from the different universities covering a range of different topics, such as, I think, when the pandemic just started, people were just confused about what COVID-19 was about. And how and back then there was a lot of speculation whether it was airborne, whether you can get it from touching the tap and things like that. So with that kind of openness and transparency, whether it's with our customers, whether it's with the other leaders in the other Schenker offices, or whether it's with our own employees, right? Again, the same message is coming through. We do not have all the answers, but we are going the extra mile to bring in the experts, to bring in the and to bring everyone to the same table where there's a platform for us to really discuss what's the best way forward. So similarly for our talents, I think when they see this kind of approach to things, they are more or less assured that they are in safe hands. And if today, very unfortunately, we have a case, we do not keep it under wraps or we try and hide it away. We are very open on what are the actionable items that we are taking. For example, sanitization of the area, or whether the company will be providing you with all the test kits and stuff like that. So I think that is one of the most critical, I would call it, factors to take care of.
Thanks, Wendy. That's very relevant as well, to kind of just make sure being open and honest around the situation and bringing in experts. I really like that. I think that goes back to your earlier point about being authentic. Thank you. So Sanjay, what are your thoughts from to that question around how do you manage the sales team where they need to be with customers?
So there are roles that cannot be done any other way but to be physically present. Yeah? And there are those roles that are going to be there. Particularly if you're giving access to people for high-speed connectivity, you have to actually go to people's houses and do something, right? Which is physical in nature. You have to move goods from one place to the other, which are the connected devices that you need to move, etc., etc. Yeah. So that's a given. Are they vulnerable? Of course they are vulnerable. They are more vulnerable than people who are not exposed to. So the chances of getting any infection are very, very high. Yeah. So that's true. So right at the beginning, we had this protocol of what we called as A2E, the 5-level protocol. Yeah. When the pandemic hit Singapore, that's when we activated this, because saying that this is not far now and it's going to come to India very soon. Yeah. Because there's too much of traffic that happens between these countries anyway. So because different states behave differently, different localities behave differently. India is not one protocol, right? And therefore that A2E protocol was required in terms of saying that If this is the severity, then everything closes down, kind of thing, including sales and so on. That's the extreme, and then graded. So that's one with protocols. The second was in terms of making sure that every single employee who's exposed, gets a particular kind of a kit, which is the sanitizer to 3 masks a day and whatever else that was required, to at least make sure that he or she is safe, including PPE kits, for that matter, people who went to other people's houses, etc. The third and the most important one was the healthcare platform that we set up for our employees. So there are about 1 million plus people who are part of that platform, because employees and the families are equally treated. So therefore, so right from every single day, there's a symptom checker that is there. Every single day you fill up that symptom checker. So you and it has a whole host of questions that you need to answer. All these people are geofenced, so we know exactly which locality they are from, etc. So vulnerability is also established. And therefore, if there is a customer to be accessed in that area, we know whether it's a red zone or green zone or amber zone, etc., etc. The platform tells you that. And therefore, you can proactively do something about it. Having got the data, the data then gets fed back to the medical team saying that this person is vulnerable today, so don't allow him to go to work or something like that. So that's one part. The second part was making sure that, there were a lot of, what do you call that? There was no standard way of dealing with this pandemic, right? Everybody had their own guesses. So whether Zincovit was the right thing to give because zinc was required or magnesium was required. So we heard on the side of saying that so every single person who was vulnerable, which means who was out in the field, would get this medicines delivered. We have a retail business, so it's relatively easier for us to actualize that. And we have a pharma platform, so in my context it will be easier, but and therefore we could do it, kind of thing. So I'm not recommending that as it's easier for us to do. Okay. Then what Wendy mentioned about the protocols at the workplace itself, because people are going to congregate together, and what are the protocols that you will follow in terms of sanitization and etc., etc. So that's the whole thing. More importantly, the reassurance that one needs to give, which is what is a positive. I'm not saying that that's the right way of looking at it, but having this whole all India tie-up with the right medical facilities, whether it was a quarantine facility, whether it was a hospitalization, or whether it was something more severe than that. That assurance, that I'll be looked after, and that facility is designated, and you know it, etc., etc. I'm not saying that you do it because of, you do it because you don't know how to handle this pandemic. So I'm not saying that this is the recipe, kind of thing. All I'm saying is that these are some of the things that work. The intent is to make sure that everybody is safe. The intent is to make sure that you do all the right things. In spite of that, of course, things can go wrong, and they did. So to me, those are some of the things that I think I can talk about, whether it's sales or anybody who's in the field. But ultimately, it's about personal discipline. Ultimately, and therefore that education, and don't limit that education to the employee, because you're going to live together with your family. And if they are, not going to follow that, it's going to be the same thing. You're going to be exposed even more. So we tracked people whose family members were in the, they were in essential services, for example, electricity and so on and so on, or people who actually were in the medical services itself. How do you treat them differently? And the database gives you that in terms of saying that. And some people then declare that my son is now a doctor or whatever else it is. So they are far more vulnerable. And do you then allow them itself to be at workplace? Are some of the decisions you make dynamically, kind of thing. So those are some of the things. I mean, I can
Thank
talk
you.
about. Yeah.
Thank you, Sanjay. I mean, very good point, specifically around it's not just a decision that you're making about one employee, but it's about the family. So keeping that context of the entire family in mind, from an education perspective, from their healthcare, even I think what you just spoke in the end about vulnerability, if the son is a doctor or so on. So I think that's a great point. I think maybe that's something that can organizations can tend to overlook, because you're only thinking about the employees but not really about the context of them as a
So
whole
Ruchi,
unit.
one more point I forget before I forget.
Sure,
Yeah.
Sanjay. Sure,
So
Sanjay.
so when we ran this vaccination drive for all our employees, yeah, we said that you could also vaccinate 6 of your family members. Why six? Because we said maybe there are 6 people. Yeah. Yeah. So looking at the ecosystem rather than just individual is very important in this case. Yeah. And when I say ecosystem and why 6 people, you might have a family of 3, but you have a maid servant who comes at home. You may have a driver who drives you around,
Yeah,
or you have some house help who comes. And
yeah,
therefore, we said people who are in regular contact with you can also get vaccinated at our facility. So think ecosystem is really what I'm saying in everything that you do. Yeah. So sorry, I missed that point. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
no, that's a very great and valid point. And yes, I think some of us already know a lot of Reliance employees who have experienced this and have been able to kind of make sure that they're part of the ecosystem, get those benefits. So thank you. I know we just have the last less than 15 minutes, but I do have still few questions. I'm going to ask one final question to you, Samir, which has come from the audience, and then one common question to everyone, in rapid fire way, before we end. So Samir, my question to you, which has come from the audience, specifically from Shraddha, is looking at the recent attrition trends in the IT industry overall, and also parallelly mass hiring for backfilling. Do you think that this will create a big opportunity for HR to come up with good virtual onboarding and exit policies? So it is keeping attrition in mind. What policies around onboarding? Yeah.
So, so I think virtual onboarding is already a reality. I think everybody understands this in every industry, and it is not just the IT industry where we are seeing huge both recruitment and attrition as company, but whether you look at any industry, I think virtual onboarding is a reality which we have to look at. Quite frankly, most of the industry like us have been used to virtual onboarding, especially when I look at my people in the places like the US, where most of my customers are based, where we had employees working all across the place, working on different customer sites, were not even really coming into my office because that's where they're. Okay. Only thing is we had to adopt that to a much larger scale here, and where you had to ensure that the virtual. Of course, that will require changes in some of the policies which we do, whether you look at simple things like background verifications and checkup systems. How do you manage your logistics? Because for us, it's not as easy as Sanjay spoke about, because you need to get some good couriers to ensure the laptops are delivered in the right place, right time. You don't want to delay by the time the employee joins. But I think that's something which we will all have to adopt to going forward. But it's not going to be a differentiator anymore when you say, hey, I have a very good virtual onboarding facility. It's going to be the next level of what type of experience do you give to people. If you look at the survey which you took in at the start, it really spoke about the employee experience, which is being the most difficult thing which we are trying to deal with. And experience is not that just one time. Experience is what you really give to a person in his full journey at person. So every touch point that you go through, and the touch point may be calling a person for an interview, or doing the joining, or allocation of work, or changing from one project to other. Every time where your touch point is just beyond you and that manager, and sometimes even so, every touch point will create an experience. And how do you look at enhancing that experience to the best that is possible within your frame, within your abilities as an organization, because each organization will have its own limitations as well as ability to do this. That's what we will have to look at. So define that employee journey look at the life of that employee. And when I say life of the employee, it's like the life of the employee which is running in parallel to the life of the organization, and which is where these two tracks are coming together. Look at every of these points and enhance each of these points. That is what will lead to both retention of the employee, also ensuring that even if the employee has exited the organization, there will be an alumni association which sometimes the road paths will cross again, and that good memories of she or he has had earlier will come back to benefit the organization. So that's where it's going to be. We have here a concept, and let's share maybe for a minute with you, is a concept which we call me enterprise. We say that every individual is like an enterprise. Today's time, if as an enterprise, what does an enterprise try to do? It tries to enhance its own value, and as it enhances its own value, it tries to enhance its own benefits. If every employee were to be looked at as an enterprise who is trying to enhance his value, and because his value is increased, his benefits too is increased, and you treat them in that respect in all the same. If you are not able to enhance a person's value, that person is going to get disengaged. It's only a matter of time he's going to drop off your grade. So you look at that employee and look at an employee enhancing and define that whole individual as an enterprise. Treat him as an individual in that all that respect, and then that's what really will define the whole life journey, which is that attrition, that employee exits are much more easily definable points, but there will be many more points in the whole journey which we need to start looking at when we look at every employee and his journey.
Great, Samir. In fact,
I hope that answers
that's
some of your questions.
yes, you have. In fact, that's a very well good segue into my last question, which a quick answer from all of you before we wrap up. You spoke about employee life cycle and different points, and that really talks about when you talk about the entire talent life cycle, it really talks about the role of one HR, which is really seeing how different functions within the HR are coming together and not working in silos to be able to give that experience to your employees. So, any quick last thoughts around this, Samir? Maybe since I'll start with you, and then Wendy and Sanjay around how do you see these various functions come together and make that shift in mindset within HR?
So, and I think I covered most of it when I talk about the whole employee business touch
Yeah.
points. But I think we need to, I think over a period, why we call it super specialization, all these things, we have lost the touch seeing that anything, what is HR, what is people connect, whether it is the manager whom we all say the line manager is the first port of call for HR, to every functions. We say, okay, he's talent acquisitions, he's L&D, he's in people operations, this is people engagement. I think we sort of kind of do super specializations at some level. We need to look at the larger picture is that you're all HR or you're all engineers. When we say, you cannot say everybody just doing specialization. I always give one example here. When we did our engineering, and even today when it's the first year of engineering is common to everybody, whichever branch of engineering you choose to. Hmm. And that's what happens again. It doesn't matter whether you're going to become a chemical engineer or a computer science engineer or a mechanical engineer. First engineer is first you have to become an engineer and then become a chemical engineer or a computer science engineer. So similar thing, you first become an HR and then you become a specialist on the top of it. So that one HR concept has to be simply appreciated. When you do that, all these things will easily come together and you'll understand the whole aspects around it.
Wonderful. Well said. Thanks, Samir. Wendy, what are your thoughts and how are you seeing this within your organization and industry?
Yeah, I think I would be echoing what Samir has shared, right? Before you are L&D, before you are talent acquisition, you are HR. So, and I think, HR professionals, they actually hold this, they know where is the calling, right? For us to actually do HR, we have to have that innate calling to do something. So if this whole 1.5 years has it brought HR closer together? Definitely, because let's say, for example, a lot of us had to do policy changes. Today, the HRBPs will discuss about it, and then we need to align with our payroll colleagues whether it's doable, it's not doable. We need to consult our L&D colleagues, to say, okay, we're going to have policy change. How are you going to drive the message across the company so that everyone understands it most effectively and in the quickest manner? So all these quick developments have only further concreted this synergy that sits within HR that probably during the good times weren't really that obvious, but what the pandemic has done is to elevate it to the next level. So, well, HR is just one family.
Thank you, Wendy. And Sanjay can bring us home. I know you've always spoken about the role of HR as enablers. Maybe, you'd like to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think hybrid workplace meant flexibility. If you want flexibility, then you need to have empowerment. I mean, otherwise there will be no flexibility. Yeah. You also need to be empathetic, as I said earlier. Yeah. If both these are true, then who's best placed to do it is really somebody who interacts with you day in, day out, kind of thing. Not that it was not true in the earlier world, but it becomes even more sharper now because the engagement levels are much lower than they used to be. Yeah. And therefore, it's all about only creating the right platforms which enable. And the ability to let go has happened because of this, saying that you anyway can't manage it. I mean, sitting centrally or whatever it is, you can wear whatever hat you want, HR or marketing, but you can't manage it. So the only hope you have is that if you put the right enablers, good chance that people who actually do that job will be able to do it much better and be successful at it. So it's about creating the right platforms. I mean, that's all I'll leave it at.
Great. Thank you, Sanjay. And you spoke about platforms earlier as well, and I clearly could see that in your examples in terms of how you've been able to create various touch points within your organization for your employees. So I think I've almost written down 3 pages worth of notes while listening to all of you around so many takeaways. I'll just kind of try and bring up few of the things around decentralizing efforts. Also, the last point that Sanjay also just made around enabling the leaders, right? How do you kind of enable? So it's a shared responsibility. More about solving for flexibility over just solving for efficiency. How have we seen that this has created an opportunity to expand our talent pools and go and hire for non-traditional talent, and really kind of bring in more diversity into our workforce. Various frameworks that were really shared around how do you, before making any decisions, think about which roles are synchronous, which roles are asynchronous, try and understand that. How do you actually look at investing in skilling and giving that onus back to the people with individual learning plans, what Samir also shared. And overall, I think the importance of empathy that Wendy also kind of really reiterated, and I particularly loved the video message by your CEO, as well as an example of how personalization kind of makes a difference. I think what we've heard today is truly going across the entire talent life cycle, and the various touch points that are important, and how we are in this world where hiring is so much more tougher, but at the same time we have an opportunity to actually look at broader talent pools, geographies. The boundaries have come down, so that gives us an opportunity. How do we equip ourselves there? From a learning and skilling perspective, how do we constantly make sure we are investing in people? And the last point that Samir made about me enterprise, that how do you create value for each individual, and that comes in with the promise, as organizations are doing, in investing and seeing that value creation for each employee. That also goes back to, I think, one of the earlier points around how do you differentiate your value proposition. I think that comes back to what you're trying to do. And engagement, I think that's throughout, in terms of how we keeping our employees engaged, what are the efforts that are being taken to ensure that there are these little moments of belonging that are created, be it these Monday morning, to drive the Monday blues, what Wendy spoke about, breakfast being delivered, or just opportunities for people to connect and share. And also, how do we kind of continue to get the pulse of what our teams are feeling. So I think these are very important points and great takeaways. So thank you, Samir, Wendy, and Sanjay, for really engaging afternoon. Very good takeaways for all of us. So thank you so much. And to the audience, thank you for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't complete all questions, but there have been so many questions, which shows that the all that our speakers have shared today has really resonated with all of you. So thank you so much. And I'd like to sign off. Thank you to the People Matters team and the LinkedIn team. So thank you, and have a great day, and stay safe, everyone. Thank you. Bye bye.